When we asked, who are you? What do you say? Who am I? How can you explain that to a person without knowing about yourself, your personality, knowing that you are aware of the situations, that is consciousness, and also that you have memory, you can recall things from the past and everything like that.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another presentation. It's BONAVENTURES. This is episode A70 in the philosophy and science wing. Today we have a topic, the pillars of personal identity, a philosophical analysis. Our thought leader today is our very own brother, Brian Mahinda. Brother Brian, please welcome for your presentation.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here and to be among this group of bonaventures and inspired learners. So basically, when we speak of the pillars of personal identity, and with the view that we are coming from a philosophical analysis perspective, what started me on this quest was the famous ship of Theseus, whereby it's asked if a ship is at sea and the king is there, and then they replace each and every plank of the ship, will it still be the same? So that first got me interested in this, and then I also found a topic based on the philosophy of death by a professor at Yale University called Shelley Kagan, who was also talking on personal identity. And so the question is, if every cell is replaced after 7 years and our memories are faded with time, our beliefs change, our bodies change, our personalities to change. So what makes me to remain the same person and persist through the time as time changes? Clearly, I am not the same as I was when I was a child, but I still relate that I am the same person throughout the changes that have been. So with this, I started with 4, of which I merged into 3, namely the pillars that we shall talk about today are body theory, the soul, and psychological continuity, which has memory and consciousness. So, personal identity asks what makes a person at one time the very same person at another time, despite the physical and psychological changes that occur across life. So we are going to look at what identity over time requires, how we know it holds, and what makes a trait truly its own. And we will begin with the body theory. In this body theory, we shall look at the body is what defines who a person is, or the identity of a person throughout time. Basically, even when we have done, let's say a person has done a crime, the law enforcement normally uses things like DNA and fingerprint to identify a person, such that if a person did a crime even 20 years ago, they can still be tracked, and the DNA, as it will not change, it identifies the person to be the same identical person. And here we are talking about numerical identity, where it's the same individual across time also. And so while you have the body theory that a person is the same, we also have a philosopher who goes by the name of Eric Olson, who states that we are human organisms, that we are just human animals. We don't have, what identifies us is not the mind or the soul or consciousness, but it's that I am the same organism from the time I was an embryo till the time that I die. From birth to death and from pre-birth to death, I have been the same organism throughout. And this raises the question of, if I am the same organism, then what about the rest of the things that I do, personalities and such things? And then we ask also, what about the organs? There are people who are born uh, who are able differently, but they don't have several organs. You may lack legs, but we still say you are the same individual as you are. Some have lost limbs due to diseases like diabetes. And also, while on the same, we look at organ transplant. If I receive the heart of another person, basically we say that I still am the same person who was there before the organ transplant and after. Now we look at the question, is it each and every organ that can be transplanted and what is not? So if I lack legs, I still am the same individual, I have the same identity. But now it comes what matters. And from biology, we learn that the mind has not had a successful transplant. So the mind has never been successfully been transplanted from one individual to the next. And this is whereby we see that maybe that which we term as a body is essentially the mind or the brain, because they seem to be interconnected in a way that we cannot yet clearly define philosophically and also biologically, as a brain contains more than 90 billion neurons. And so we see that the brain functions to be such that it's the center of consciousness, it's the center of like each and everything. Even the most of our calories are taken up by the brain to power up the whole body. And then when we go on with the body theory, we look also at the spatio-temporal location. An object persists only if there is an unbroken path through space and the time linking its stages, such that we have held that we have come to the belief that, or to ascertain that matter cannot be found in two places at the same time. And this is also the same for the body theory. I cannot be here and in another place, yet we say I'm the same individual. So this truly paves the way to articulate the body theory. But now it faces some several challenges of whereby recently physicists have discovered that in entanglement there are atoms which can exist in two separate places at the same time and all of them have mass. Namely, they did this with the helium atoms at the Australian National University, and that is a breakthrough that has also philosophical consequences, of which they will be clarified maybe later on. And so we find also another challenge which we are going to speak about, which is about the split brain instances later on. But basically the body theory is that using our bodies, we are the same, because if I want to know who maybe Brian is, if we've met today and you want to find who Brian is tomorrow, you will look at the person who looks exactly like me. Tomorrow you'll identify me using my body and not anything else. All the memories and everything will come later, but basically you will identify me using my body. So that is basically the body theory. And the next is the soul theory. The main advocates for these are Plato and Descartes. Plato, in his Phaedo, treats the soul akin to an eternal form, naturally fit to survive the body's dissolution. So it's an immaterial form that can survive the dissolution of the body. And Descartes says that he gives us using his methodical doubt, he comes to say that I think therefore I am, that he is a thinking being. So it's the mind or the material part of him that gives him his specific identity. And so with the soul theory, we see that there is an immaterial form that persists through time. And so far, challenges have been fronted on this end of the soul theory, that it's the same soul throughout time. And the first one is that we don't identify people by souls. And one of the questions that I got while looking at this theory is that, can the soul remember without the brain? Can memory exist without the human brain? Which is a tough question to say, because if we believe that the soul is immaterial and it survives death, then we can ask if a person, if that soul will remember maybe its life on earth, which is something philosophically cannot be empirically proved for now. So, and also the philosopher John Locke brought forth a thought experiment of a prince and a cobbler that states that you imagine these two people, there is a prince and a cobbler, and then you take the memories, the personalities and everything of the prince, you put it in the cobbler, and then you take that of a cobbler and you put them in the prince. Now he asks us, who is the prince and who is the cobbler? Whom will you state is the prince and the cobbler? Does it depend on the body, or does it depend on the other characteristics such as consciousness and personality traits? And also, like, he questioned mostly about the soul in this one, whereby he states that the soul is not evidently the thing that is granting us our personal identity, but it's memory. If we lack memory then and consciousness, then we have no identity to relate with others or with ourselves as well. So with that on the soul theory, we get into the theory on psychological continuity. So this theory was begun by John Locke in his essay on human understanding. So he proposed that identity consists in the sameness of consciousness tracked through memory, that a later person is the same as an earlier one, only if the latter person can remember the earlier one's experiences from the inside. So basically what Locke is saying here is that if I, who may be maybe 50 years old, can remember myself as a 30-year-old person, and that 30-year-old can remember the 20-year-old, that 20-year-old can remember the 10-year-old, that through that sameness of consciousness tracked in memory, that is what makes us to be who we are. That is what gives us personal identity. Now, Thomas Reid, a philosopher, also challenged Locke on this point, that if it's memory, then he stated that, he gave the example of a general who had conquered a war at around the same 60 years, and who had also conquered while he was a private at around 20 years. But then it happens that he had done a mistake at around 10 years, was beaten for it by the parents, or was disciplined for that mistake. But now the general could not recall. He could recall himself as a 30-year-old person, and while he was at 30, he could recall that he did a mistake at 10 years old, and also on the same, that he was disciplined by the parents. But now at 60, he cannot recall himself at 10 years old. Now it states that if I cannot recall, then it brings about a contradiction, that memory cannot be sufficient as a tool for personal identity. And also there is a case whereby it's also asked that what about dementia, maybe severe dementia and Alzheimer's. So these are diseases whereby a person undergoes memory loss, and there is also thinking is also tampered with in a certain way, and speech. And if a person cannot remember who they are, forgets all about the family and everyone else, now what is their identity? Are they still the same person they were 5 minutes ago if they cannot recall whom they were at that point in time, compared to 10 minutes later where they've forgotten everything they did back then? So this is the theory of John Locke on memory. And also, hereby, it has been later on perfected by a philosopher called Derek Parfit, who was an Englishman, lived from 1942 to 2017. And in his book Reasons and Persons, he said that identity does not hold, but psychological continuity is what gives us our personal identity. It's the main killer for our personal identity. And for him, he differentiates between psychological connectedness and psychological continuity in such a way that psychological connectedness is the connectedness, or is how our psychological states seem to be connected to each other throughout time. Like my beliefs may be connected from when I was a kid till when I'm a grown-up, and that gives me my identity. So it ranges from beliefs, emotional states, and also things like moods and everything else. Now for him, he does not front this, but he says that psychological continuity, which is the overlapping chain of connectedness over time, is what gives us our identity. So he says that this chain, if I can recall, the memories of myself are like a chain throughout time, such that when I was a child I formed memories, and there is a psychological identity that I had back then, and that this chain has helped me. Even if I change my beliefs, those beliefs are changed because of something in the current sense of what I was undergoing, and then when I change them, they are tied to those beliefs that I had back then and to my memories back then, such that memory is like a chain, and also this psychological continuity is like a chain through time. And in this thought experiment, so he proposed several thought experiments whereby he was not advocating for the body theory, he was against both the body theory. And there is one thought experiment known as Mars, whereby he states that, similar to the Star Trek movies, teleportation devices are used to destroy the original. So it occurs in a way that a person enters a teleportation device, and they are scanned atom by atom, and the same is replicated simultaneously in Mars through another teleportation device, whereby here there occurs vaporization of atoms here on Earth, while atoms there are replicated together with memories, personalities, and everything, character traits and everything. So he asks the question, who is who at that time? Did you survive while the body was vaporized, or are you still the same person, or did you die and another person appeared there? Holding that this other person has the same beliefs as you, the same character traits and everything else. Now, to further this thought experiment, he also states that suppose you go there to the teleportation device, and then, well, it's supposed to be vaporizing you. You are told that it has had a malfunction, but then you are told that nothing great happened, but your heart was injured maybe a little by the machines and devices and the process, and that you'll die in a few days. But they tell you the happy news is that there exists another person on Mars also who has replicated the same as you, the same things, the family, he knows about the families, your beliefs, your character traits, and everything else. And this other person tells you that he thanks you that you've been there and advises you that when you die, he'll still go and take care of your family and everything else. So he asks us, if you are that person, would you say you are the person on Mars or the person on Earth? So this raises a question to personal identity based on that. And also he gave the fusion and fission experiments, whereby he states that suppose my brain, I donate it and it's taken to two people. A half of my brain is given to another person and another half is given to another person. And this is mostly posited by philosophers who say that it's the brain that gives us an identity, it's the psychological continuity. So for him, he states that in this fission experiment or thought experiment, that if my brain is given to two people, namely maybe Jake and another person, maybe Mark. So if the brain of Brian perhaps is taken and two halves are given both to each, now he says that if they persist and if these people gain the memories that I had and they gain everything, the beliefs and everything, so do I exist in two bodies at the same time, or what really happens? Now that is fission. And the reverse, he says, is fusion, whereby you have had an accident and then your brain has been damaged, and now you take half of a brain from someone else, from two different people, a half each from Mary and a half each from maybe Jude. You bring these two brains to an individual person such that this person now has memories of two different people. Now, in this thought experiment on psychological continuity, if this exists, this psychological continuity, now who is who here? Is this new person, let's say this person was called maybe Elijah. Elijah receives half the brain of Mary, half the brain of Jude. Now, is it Elijah, is it Mary, or is it Jude who is there existing at that point? Now, this is also a question on personal identity. And on the same, Bernard Williams also came up with a thought experiment for us to see if we can think a little bit about who we really are on our personal identity. So basically what Bernard Williams stated was that suppose he gave this thought experiment. Suppose there exists a psychological swap between two bodies such that let's say Mary and Eve, if we can use them for the time being. So you take the personality traits of this person, the memories and everything, such that you swap them and you put those in Mary, you put in Eve, those on Eve, you put in Mary. Now suppose you are one of the characters in this thought experiment, and then he states that this mad scientist gives you money. So if you want to take the money, whom would you prefer to take the money? Is it you, one of the characters, of which you're in a different body, but your beliefs are the same in a different body, or is it the other person? And to further it a little bit, he said that suppose your memories are taken and everything, and they are swapped with another person, and both of you know each other. Now, this mad scientist asks you whom to torture. Do you want to be tortured in the body of Mary, or do you want your body, which has the personalities of Mary and everything else, to be tortured? So hereby most people tend to say that they will not prefer their bodies, and neither will they prefer themselves to be tortured, because you're experiencing pain even if you're in another body. And we are so much attached to our bodies that even if it happened that there was a swap, we will still be attached to those bodies also. So, and modern challenges to all of these theories, but mainly to the psychological continuity theory, which has personality, memory, and consciousness. I was digging a little bit on the biology side of things, and so I found there is a disorder previously known as multiple personality disorder, and nowadays it's known as dissociative identity disorder, whereby a single person has multiple personalities, or alters as they call them. And what's the important thing in this is that each of these alters has their own memory, has their own characteristics, personality, attributes, has a different name, and even they ascribe to a different gender. Now in this case, whom do you say the person is? Is it this person, or how do you identify who is who now? Because there is memory loss in these instances, such that you find the psychologist Carl Jung, in explaining this, stated that these alters are like this. So there exists a personality A, B, C, D, E, whereby you find that A knows of the existence of B, but B does not know of the existence of A, B, C, D, and E. But you find there is also C, who knows the existence of D, but D does not know of the existence of A and B, but knows of the existence of D and E. So you find that in these alters and in this dissociative identity disorder, a person or a personality, in quotes, may take over the body of a person, and then they do their things because they have their memories, and it's because it's something that came on as a result of trauma, such that it's to protect the person. So the person has distinct memories, whereby if one personality or alter takes over and then another comes through, they don't remember what they were doing, what activities, or where they were. They find themselves just like one of them was stating that there's a time she was driving, put on music, was going to the store, but then another personality took over. And when this other personality took over, it returned back home, went to a party, and forgot all about going to the store to buy the shopping. And then after 3 days, she found herself somewhere she did not know how she had gotten there. And now she came back, and it's something they are dealing with in the community, as these disorders are affecting us nowadays. So it gives the question, or it asks us, in such cases, who is who, or where does personal identity lie? Is it with the main host? Is it with the other personalities? Because some exhibit personalities of children, whereby you find it's a 40-year-old man or woman and acts like a child of 6 years, and everything they do is like that. So it asks a deeper question on what really grants us personal identity. And also something that has happened in the recent past, there was famously known as the case of Phineas Gage, who was an American railroad worker. And while he was working on the railroad, an accident happened such that his frontal lobe was pierced by the rod, and this affected this part of the brain such that he had what we can term as a cool personality before. He was friendly with people, caring and everything else. But when the frontal lobe was taken or was removed through this process and he survived, he totally changed his personality. He was rude, he was angry, he didn't have friends, he was impulsive in his decisions and everything that he did. Now, if it's memory and personality that gives us our personal identity, and if this part of the brain can be taken away and we change our personality, then does it mean that it's only the frontal lobe that grants us personal identity? So there is also this case of split brain patients, and these are questions that are thrown to us as we discuss this idea, or we discuss the pillars of personal identity. Now, in split brain patients, what occurs is that due to some illness or something that happens, the corpus callosum, that is a part of the brain that links the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, is severed, such that for these people, if you are projecting something on the right side, and of which it's going to the vision part that is going to the left hemisphere, and we say that maybe this hemisphere is associated with language and such things, you find that the person maybe can see that object but cannot communicate it. And also it raises the question that if these two parts of the brains that are existing, but you find that it's like the brain has two consciousnesses that are separate, such that one can know something is happening but cannot articulate it. The other one, they can draw what they are seeing and they cannot speak it, because the different parts of the brain that are associated with that are not the ones which are receiving the information. And you may ask, what is the importance of personal identity? So personal identity is what makes us in law and crime to persecute a person, given that they are the same person who did the crime, they are the same perpetrator, and they have the same memories. And this is whereby questions of memory come by. If it is not the same person, will you persecute them? Like in the case of dissociative identity disorder, if this person does not remember everything that they did, can they be persecuted for something they did while another personality had taken over? And it also asks us, when we write our wills, if we cannot remember under dementia that we wrote a will and it was to this and this person that the properties or our valuables we are sharing out, then can we say that it is the same person who wrote the will and it is not the same person? Can we contest it? Now, personal identity also helps us in our beliefs and everything. For those who do believe in the soul and resurrection and surviving death and reincarnation and such things, they believe there is an immaterial soul that is a ground for this personal identity. In ethics, we also have the medical ethics, whereby in the question of end of life, and we find that there are permanent vegetative states whereby a person has been in a coma maybe for years, there are low traces of consciousness or there are none at all. So, is this person the same as a person who was living? Do we still qualify to state that the person can make a choice, or the identity, is it still the same? Does it remain? And now when we talk about obligations and responsibilities, suppose you are being married to someone, or you are marrying someone, or both of you are getting married to each other. In the case of personal identity, suppose we go with the psychological continuity and memories and everything. If I do change, and I do change each and every day, beliefs and everything else, now what bearing does it give to my life, such that am I the same person who did a contract of marriage 20 years ago, and still I'm obligated by the same, as a same individual, to continue to uphold this throughout my life? Because if everything changes and I don't have something that is grounding my personal identity, then I will have no obligations and no responsibilities. And so basically, for the conclusion that is there, is that personal identity and asking who am I may be the most important question we ever ask ourselves. It is also the one to which no single answer will ever be fully adequate. And that's not a failure of philosophy, but it's a reflection on the genuine depth and complexity of what it means to be a person. Thus, personal identity is not a problem to be solved once and for all, but a question to be lived with, a mirror in which we examine ourselves more deeply with each and every passing year. The examined life, as Socrates put it, examining the question, who am I, is where that examination must begin. And mine has been the realization that personal identity, for me, as I looked and worked on these three pillars of personal identity, is that it is the living integration of both the body, the soul, the mind, psychological continuity, and connectedness continually unfolding through time, or in time. And it's a deep question for which we must think it thoroughly during our day-to-day life, and on what gives us that identity. So thank you, and it has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Brother Brian, for the presentation. Now we kickstart our usual discussion. For those that recently joined in, the topic today was the pillars of personal identity, a philosophical analysis. So let me start by asking the first question. What exactly are you telling us today through this article?
What I'm bringing on or saying is that personal identity basically cannot be contained within one single philosophical theory, or maybe it may be developed, but it's mainly an integration of that whom we are. As Aristotle said, that we are embodied souls, and so we have a body, we have a soul, but we also have memories, we have our personalities that are attached to our body, as our body is a source of everything that we experience. And so our identity mainly is given by an integration of all these pillars, and it continually unfolds throughout time, from when you are children till when we die.
Thank you. And the pillars of personal identity, what are those pillars that you identified?
So the main pillars are the main theories that have been talked on. There is a body theory, whereby the body is one of the pillars that grounds our identity. The soul is the other theory, that we exhibit an immaterial soul, and this immaterial soul does not change, it persists in time. And this also is a ground for that same identity. And the third is psychological continuity. And as we talk of psychological continuity, hereby we talk of the personality, the memories, the consciousness. All of these are within mostly body, and we can say the mind or the brain for that matter. The brain as a material entity, which whereby it's responsible for consciousness and everything, such that the actions we undertake and every experience that shapes us is provided through these mediums of the body, the mind, and this psychological continuity, such that without memory, if we cannot remember what we do daily, then we can never identify our beliefs or anything that we are.
Thank you very much, Brother Brian, for the presentation. Now we kickstart our usual discussion. For those that recently joined in, the topic today was the pillars of personal identity, a philosophical analysis. So let me start by asking the first question. What exactly are you telling us today through this article?
What I'm bringing on or saying is that personal identity basically cannot be contained within one single philosophical theory, or maybe it may be developed, but it's mainly an integration of that whom we are. As Aristotle said, that we are embodied souls, and so we have a body, we have a soul, but we also have memories, we have our personalities that are attached to our body, as our body is a source of everything that we experience. And so our identity mainly is given by an integration of all these pillars, and it's continually unfolds throughout time, from when you are children till when we die.
Thank you. And the pillars of personal identity, what are those pillars that you identified?
So the main pillars are the main theories that have been talked on. There is a body theory, whereby the body is one of the pillars that grounds our identity. The soul is the other theory, that we exhibit an immaterial soul, and this immaterial soul does not change, it persists in time. And this also is a ground for that same identity. And the third is psychological continuity. And as we talk of psychological continuity, hereby we talk of the personality, the memories, the consciousness. All of these are within mostly body, and we can say the mind or the brain for that matter. The brain as a material entity, which whereby it's responsible for consciousness and everything, such that the actions we undertake and every experience that shapes us is provided through these mediums of the body, the mind, and this psychological continuity, such that without memory, if we cannot remember what we do daily, then we can never identify our beliefs or anything that we are. When we asked, who are you? What do you say? Who am I? How can you explain that to a person without knowing about yourself, your personality, knowing that you are aware of the situations, that is consciousness, and also that you have memory, you can recall things from the past and everything like that. And also your body, even though there are changes that occur, it's still the same thing throughout time also. Yeah, so these are the main three pillars on which personal identity for me hinges upon.
Thank you. So in the beginning, you mentioned of a paradox.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's known as the ship of Theseus paradox. It's a classical paradox where the question whether an object like a ship remains the same
Yeah, sure.
after all its original components have been replaced. So, by your suggestion today, how would you respond to such a classical paradox, such as the ship of Theseus. After all parts have been replaced, should we still identify that ship as the ship of Theseus?
Uh, okay, so for the ship of Theseus, noting that each and every plank has been removed and then maybe they've taken another one and replaced it with. So we can look at the structure of the ship. Is it still the same structure of the ship that is there? Noting that the materials may be different. And for this, maybe we can say yes. But now, there is also something that is also furthered upon this ship of Theseus. And another person asks like this, supposing each and every plank that was from that ship, the original ship of Theseus, as it was being taken, it made another ship with the same structure. Now, what is the original ship of Theseus, we might ask? So, is it the one that Theseus still is on when he arrives, or is it the other one that contains all the previous things? Now, for this has been maybe a complex one, noting that there are two ships now, not one, and we can say maybe the ship of Theseus is the one that Theseus is on. Even if it changes, there are some certain things it does not change, like maybe the people who are on it, and even if maybe the people change, the plants do change, yes, but it retains its original structure, and maybe way of functioning also might be the same. But I don't know if it has answers that are specific, but that's my view.
Thank you. So please, Brother Datius, Dr. Mianjo, you're welcome for anything.
Yeah, maybe I would be. This is a nice discussion, but let us try to reflect on what you have said, on the complexity of the idea of personality, on the complexity of the idea of personality, to which I agree. But I have one question. Could we refer personality to identity also? Do they go together, personality and identity?
Not really.
Yes.
Our personality might be one of the things that gives us our identity, because our personality also is different from other things. There are things like memories that help us in our personality, but basically our personality is how we are perceived, or how we perceive ourselves, and this, and maybe the case of what do we like, how do we think, what do we believe in, and things like that. That's mainly what I can say maybe personality is all about. But personality cannot be the main the main the main pillar that grounds our identity, because if we have personality, yes, and let's say in the case of dissociative identity disorder, because it's one of the challenges that really came to me, if one person has 22 different personalities, then in this single entity, whom do we say who is the true person in that body, for which we might identify at a body at a certain time, because the identities keep on changing. Someone pops up, tells you they are Jake. In a few minutes, the person dissociates with the alter that was there, or the personality, and another one comes. Now this one is Mary. She's a child of 6 years. And then after maybe one day, you get another person, maybe Layla. Now this is a 40-year-old woman. She identifies herself as a 40-year-old woman. But these are all personalities within the same individual. Now, if we say that this personality can ground identity, then we can have like 40 identities within one individual, which cannot be viable for stating something like that, considering that there are also other several factors that that are grounding our personal identity, to know that this is the same person. Even if these things are happening, we can still know that this is the same person I was talking to yesterday.
Are the identities subject to change as personality is subject to change?
Yes, they are.
What grants that changes?
One of the things may be trauma. We may change because of trauma that we have experienced. We may change because of, namely, the experiences that we encounter also. We may face something that may change our belief also. Considering the field of religion, one may experience something or an encounter with the divine, and that may lead to that person changing their way of life totally, and their personality also changes from that time, but they still remain to be the same person in quotes also we see.
Will he still remain the same identity at that time when he changes his belief? Will he still remain with the same identity?
Yeah, that is what I am putting forth, that an individual may have a single identity irrespective of the personality that they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if they have different personalities throughout time, they still receive the same identity.
Now, how do we, I'm just wondering,
Yes.
how do we then express identity outside of personality, behavior, or human actions?
Yeah.
How do you express that identity outside of human actions? That human action is acting in the way that may portray certain values that we see from him.
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
in your presentations, if we separate identity from personality, then how are we able then to exhibit human identity that we do not see there, but you only are able to infer it from the way he exhibits reality, he does things. How are we then able to detect that if we separate from that?
Okay, thank you. So, personality and identity may be two different things at first, because personality may be the way that we do things, our beliefs, and everything, and identity may be on the basis of maybe gender, what we do, who am I, the identity of a teacher, and these things also. But basically, while talking of personal identity, we are speaking of what makes you the same throughout time, from the time of conception till death. What makes you the same, such that when I meet you, I can say that this is Dr. Mihanjo. What makes you you throughout the persistence of time? This is what we are seeking to understand as personal identity. And so personality is one aspect, and identity also comes in as another aspect to create the whole of personal identity, together with memories, knowing that the soul also is there, maybe the intellect and the will assisting us in knowing the good and willing them and doing them also, and our memories also, our consciousness is also, like consciousness is mainly a part of the brain that we call the thalamus and the cortex, such that if something impairs that, you can still function, but you are not aware of everything that is happening. So you might not, even the law cannot hold you responsible for a crime that you commit, because under that you are not conscious of any activity. You might be the same with a person who is sleepwalking. They are doing things, but they are not aware of themselves doing those things. There is a time loss or time gap that exists within their life also.
May I ask you one practical question? I think you may refer that to what you are presenting here. It will be meaningful.
Yes.
Try to reflect on that. There is a book I've done by whom, written, African Crisis of Identity. And there's also another book written, The African Personality. In the book of African Crisis of Identity, it tries to show that Africans exactly have failed to establish themselves exactly who are. And because of that one, it's also difficult to establish a clear personality, African personality. Now, my question would be that one. Given what you have been explained here, will you be in the position to accept it with those guys who say Africa is the crisis, they have a crisis of identity, or you refute it? And if you accept it, what ground from what you explained here would justify your acceptance and your refutations that Africans have a crisis of identity? And if it's really true that is a crisis of identity, what does it imply?
Okay. uh, so all in all, for this, that the question Africans and the question of the identity. So this will shift from personal identity, since personal identity is based on one person. But when we look at the whole continent of Africa and it facing a crisis of identity, my understanding is that as Africans, we are not depicting ourselves with the identity of African, in quotes, as I can say, namely of the values that we hold as Africans, our way of life as Africans, which is different from the West, noting that here we are more communal, where the West is individualistic in nature, and also like we exist within communities and the values that we advocate for, and our way of viewing life, whereby we view life as an interconnectedness of the vital force, or an interconnectedness of nature in its own way. And while we say that Africans are losing their identity, I agree to a certain point that Africans really are losing their identity with the whole concept of Westernization, and that while we still take on things that have been brought from the West or from the East, we are losing our values. Like sometimes we can see the lack of respect that is there. We can also see people no longer want to identify with Africa as a place that they came from. They view it as a desolate maybe place, a place maybe that is full of, some people have said, we normally beg for aid and everything. We lack development. They're one of the most corrupt places. And we can see this as that when we talk about the Africans losing their identity, mainly we can speak on it on the issue that we may be ascribing to Western values and to Western way of life and neglecting our own that has been good and that can keep us alive with that identity of Africans, such that when we go to other places like the West, not only our facial colors or our race as Africans can tell us that we are Africans, but also by the way we perceive things and we look at things also.
What personality?
So what was, I may beg that you ask on personality?
Yes, the question was, they say also we are in the crisis of personality. My understanding, as I said, that personality is the exhibition, the external expression of internal values, and the way a person actually demonstrates those values into action, to way of doing things. And if that's the case now, personality springs from the internal values that one, the unit of values that one happens to be something ideal. And if we are losing those values, means that we're also losing the direction, the core to which we can express our personality. don't you think that in doing so, we are also losing identity?
Yes, I agree with you there that we are losing both our personality, noting that, as you have said, it is an interconnectedness of the values and how we exhibit them externally. And in such a case, maybe we can see like the African cases, whereby I may give an example on the occurrence of theft in traditional African communities and its the prevalence that it has right now, noting that both are not the same. Coming from a community of farmers in our ethnic group or tribe, what happened is that we normally had a ban whereby anyone in the community who was experiencing maybe had low account of food in their granaries or anything like that, they will go to that communal granary or barn. They take what they don't have, even if there was a wafer or a person who was passing through the village at that time. Instead of maybe stealing someone's arrowroots or anything like that, they would just go. It was left open. You just go, take what you need, and then you proceed on with your journey. This ensured that there was the value of like honesty, caring, also kindness was there also. But noting nowadays that we have this mentality of that each and everything is for me, myself, and I, that we keep things more to ourselves instead of sharing them with the community, whereby we find that people may be neighbors yet, but we don't have that African personality or identity, whereby we used to ask the other person or to mind the other person if they are ongoing any difficulties or if they are undergoing anything that may be strenuous on them, and even if they are hungry, that we share our food with them. But nowadays we find even if those living in maybe the so-called apartments or plots, if I close my door, then that is the end of the life of me and the community, such that the next neighbor might starve and might die, and also I cannot know and I cannot lend a hand. Thus, this may be one of the things of maybe theft, and also that nowadays we steal a lot, not basic, even the governments and everything. And in traditional Africa, there were no cases of such things, or maybe they were very, very minimal.
Thank you very much. If you were to present this work again, I maybe suggest you, then it's a very good work, a very scientific work. You try to connect this work in trying somehow not to leave hanging scientifically, but try also to reflect on our own situations in Africa, whether what you say about the work for brain, the body, this one, whether this has to, the deficiency on this may explain maybe the crisis of identity which we are going on, the replacement of the body, that's what you're saying, because of the body. The replacement of character, the magnitude of character, whether has dismissed one, has actually eroded the other one over the other, and how is the memory have been disturbed and the process to such extent that we are no longer concentrating by certain issues, the issues that actually deals with what makes African and African, but we are thrown into somewhere and we have lost the concentrations of that memory to that, and then we went to somewhere else. So we find ourselves into swinging somewhere. I think that some presentations would do a lot. Would do a lot try to give a scientific explanation to what actually, why we are, that this problem. You should not fear to give this because it might give a new wake up and a kind of inquisitory mind, trying to search for the self. Where are we? And where is it? Where do we are supposed to go? Because it's the fact. It's no longer a secret that we are in crisis. This no longer is a fact. It's also a fact that we are lagging behind. It's also in the fact we have also personality crisis. All those kind of things, if they are well articulated and connected, I think your presentation to me would be a super presentation in the real, because it really deals with a present issue and current issue, not simply a mere scientific study, but also predicated, a scientific study predicated to a particular problems. And that scientific study may somehow contribute to provide a clue for the answers that we are searching for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahinda. Thank you very much, Brian, for the presentation. It's been a fruitful presentation, and hopefully we'll have version 2 of this same presentation, which will carry what Dr. Mahinda is suggesting. Ladies and gentlemen, today's presentation was The Pillars of Personal Identity, a philosophical analysis. The thought leader was Brother Brian Mahinda, and this was episode A70 of Philosophy and Science Swing under Bonaventure's platform. Till next time, bye for now.